What makes us human? What differentiates the good from the bad? If the world ended, would we know where that line is? At a time where things are more divided than ever, there is one thing that will always unite us: memento mori. The world depicted across these three movies simultaneously gives us hopelessness and direness, the total collapse of society, as well as light that you can find in humanity. Despite all of the films being UK based, these films aim to look at the line that makes us human. And is it possible to cross that line whilst keeping your humanity? Is there ever a scenario when you can cross that line? These are all questions that we never really get directly answered, and I think that's great. We saw the initial collapse of the wasteland that was once the UK, the horror of that isolation, no help from the rest of the world, the smallest of errors making the difference between survival and death. But there's also the perfect amount of human moments that ground the characters in that movie. They're adjusting to this new world that they're 28 days into. 28 Days Later is a brutal movie that can feel pretty unrelenting at times. For me, after recently watching 28 Days and 28 Weeks, the depiction of the apocalypse in these films really have an edge on other apocalyptic based films. I think one of the reasons that comes down to is how the infected aren't ever presented as the villains. They're not depicted as the usual zombie-like creatures. I mean, they are zombie-like, and I do still call them zombies, because they kind of serve that purpose, but they're also technically not. They're still very much alive. It's a depiction of a societal collapse and what humanity chooses to do when they're forced to focus on themselves and solely themselves. They don't really have an option. Selena in the first film reiterates that strongly throughout and showcases it when she doesn't even flinch to kill Mark after he becomes infected, but Jim brings to light how connection can help. She learns that maybe the total selfish perspective of survival is leading them down a negative path, as we see through the military at the end. But then on the other side of that is when we get the question of how far can you go before losing your humanity. Jim, of course, goes on a rampage to save the girls at the end of the first film. And yeah, he's absolutely in the right, but it once again blurs that line because of how unapologetically brutal he is. A brilliant way that Danny Boyle showcases this is with the use of the camera. He crafts a beautiful relationship between actor and camera. The infected were shot in a higher frame rate to normal people, except when Jim goes on that mission in that final act, he's shot in a higher frame rate, giving that same harsh, quicker movement as the infected. Following that film, we saw a forceful attempt to rebuild, and it kind of reiterates a lot of what was said in the first film, but this new sequel is where the lore is expanded on massively, and continues the conversation started, as well as bringing a load of new ideas to the table. 28 Years Later, for me, as much as it is a brilliant horror film, it's an emotional battle and a coming-of-age story that features the first true experience and understanding of death and the real world. The family we follow live on this island, and they've pretty much adapted to this new life. Spike is really the main character of the film, 12 years old, and this guy's first acting performance, he's incredible. I can't fault a second he's on screen. But he's obviously been raised in this world, so it's a fascinating idea to see what someone who wouldn't know any different would become. He doesn't know what life was like before. It pins Spike against his dad at times, and they both are very valid in their feelings and where their thoughts differ. But it becomes apparent through the second half of the film, after Spike returned from his first mainland trip, that where they live isn't exactly the real world that he's been led to believe. I don't think the island intends this negatively, but they have become more of an army militia type civilization, teaching children how to fight from as young as possible, and could very much be compared to radicalizing ideas. They have regressed in a way. As the infected have evolved and adapted, these people have gone backwards in efforts to ensure survival with the current state of the country. When Spike sees the real world and that there is more out there, he begins to question everything, and that doubt becomes stronger when he sees his dad cheating on his terminally ill mother. Although Spike doesn't know what's wrong with his mother at this point. Realizing there are more people out there, allegedly including a doctor that his dad once ran into and knew and claims is insane, he takes it upon himself to travel with his mother in search of help from this doctor to find out what's wrong. And this is the first time the film takes a real shift. There is still plenty of horror throughout, but in very different ways, as Spike takes a journey through understanding the real world. There are people that cannot be trusted and that are dangerous, and the infected have evolved to survive in a way that reminded me a lot of The Last of Us. These beings aren't dead reanimated, they're still people, but the rage virus has consumed them, and there hasn't been a cure found, and there may never be. They still require food and water, and have had to adapt to living off different food sources. If they don't eat or drink, they will die, the same as us. And it brings an interesting angle. This is why these depictions of zombies are so different, because you still have to actually kill them, and by that I mean take any humanity that could be left away. I mean, you still have to do the initial thing of taking their life, whereas when you kill a normal zombie, you're killing someone who's already died. Some of the infected now hunt in packs with an alpha, which is legitimately fucking terrifying.
So the scariest thing would be to have huge naked men running around with huge hard-ons.
A smarter evolved form of the infection that can communicate and can have patience as well as inhuman durability. Nature has reclaimed a lot of the land and the rage virus has evolved with that. It is the story of evolution. Some of them are slower but can survive on things like worms, but there are others such as the alphas. The scene where Spike and Jamie are running back through the water to reach the island had me holding my breath at how powerful and quick and how much ease the alpha could catch up to them. Boyle continues to use the camera in inventive ways. There's such a cool effect when some of the infected are cool, it does like a 180 spin, and there's just some straight out beautiful or haunting shots throughout the film. Constantly, the film is never dull to look at, and we get a lot of intimate shots as well. Because of the nature of being shot a lot with iPhones, you really do get that personal feel with the characters. And similarly to the lower quality of the first film, it does add this grounded grunge sense to a degree. We actually see a pregnant infected in this film give birth as well, in a very intense scene, not knowing what is going to happen here, what this child is going to be like. But the baby seems to be fine, uninfected, despite the mother. Once again, drawing a lot of attention to the fact that these are not dead people walking, and life can find a way. Directly following that, we meet a scientist who pretty much coexists with the infected, saving Spike and his mother from the alpha with drugs, not killing him, just knocking him out. This is all at odds with what the rest of the characters have perceived, as well as us, leading to the insane final act of the film. Dr. Ian Kelson takes us to the Bone Temple. This thing has deservedly been all over the marketing because it looks incredible, but I didn't expect it to make me cry. I really thought it was going to be a horrific setting for some awful events, which is kind of true, but I really genuinely was on the verge of tears. The lip was trembling. Kelson has made this temple to remember the dead. His real intention has been to use the bones of the dead to remember them. Memento mori translates to remember you will die. These words have been all over history. I knew them from using it in Dead by Daylight particularly. But its significance in this film really did bring a tear to my eye. The entire second half of the film continued to subvert our expectations. We had some text after the prologue explaining that the virus had been driven back to the UK and solely the UK. We are now kept in isolation and quarantine from the rest of the world. We get that exposition from a dude from Sweden who finds himself stranded in the UK and is now stuck. This brings commentary in of itself because of how comically unaware that this guy is of what the state of the UK actually is. They're all dead set on making sure the infected don't escape and that it all stays here and that they can just fend for themselves. But they have no idea what's actually going on in there. He has no idea how the infected work or anything, and kind of through all that, through that isolation, the UK have built its own walls against each other. In a way, I think the island where our protagonists reside treats the mainland how the rest of the world treats the UK as the whole in this film. It's an interesting parallel because to start with, we can point and easily say everyone in Europe is a dick because they've just let the UK fall to shit. But when even the people within the UK are doing such things, this isolated island keeping everyone out and leaving people like Dr. Kelson alone and others potentially dangerous individuals that we get hints of throughout the film that want to fill the void of power. Kelson actually comes in to shine some light into the film. I thought he was going to be a scary character from the trailers, but quite the opposite. There are some really funny moments, especially from him. His main role is within the most emotional part of this film, having this temple dedicated to all of the dead, and to remind us that we are ultimately mortal. Infected or not, we die. Death comes for us all eventually, and that's nature. He takes a look at Tyler and comes to the speculative conclusion that she has cancer. Whether it started from her brain and spread out or vice versa, it's definitely in her brain, hence her confusion, and so now they're both forced to educate Spike. It is a tragic sequence. After seeing the light that can be found in the world, Spike is almost immediately shown how death can't be a controlled variable. In a world overcome by evolving rage, Spike is forced to come to terms with these ideas as Isla finally understands what has been wrong, so she's able to accept it. Kelson then gives a second phrase, "Remember, you must love," as Spike struggles to accept that his mother cannot be saved due to the natural course of life. He returns with Isla's skull for Spike to add to the memorial, placing it at the top, allowing her to view the sunrise. Remember, you will die, but also remember, you must love. That is the core of this movie, the beating heart, if you will. Spike has been on a journey of self-discovery and understanding about what the real world is like, and experiencing one of the hardest of life's inevitabilities, losing your mother. Continuing on his own journey after sending the newborn child back to the island to be safe, writing a note explaining he needs more time before returning, and just as he's embarking on this journey to continue that self-growth, he is intercepted by Jimmy. A name we'd heard in the prologue, which was terrifying by the way, but we've also seen the name throughout the film, carved into and infected and just written on walls, built up as a presumably twisted individual. Him and other Jimmys are dressed in bright coloured tracksuits and covered in jewellery and blonde hair in a very over-the-top action scene to save Spike from a swarm of infected before requesting he joins them. I don't totally love it because it is a real hit of tonal whiplash. I think it might have been better placed just at the start of the next movie. But nonetheless, I like the potential it has and am very interested in the sequel. It circles back to the terrifying prologue, and we can kind of gather that from the moment we last saw him in that opening, this kid has not really grown up. He's not necessarily adapted to the new world. The last time we saw him, he was watching Teletubbies, and all their outfits somewhat represent the colourful nature of that show. But the disturbing thing comes when you realise the rather apparent correlations that these guys bring to an infamous Jimmy in real life, who was exposed in 2012 after getting away with heinous crimes against children for way too long, despite being a personality broadcast by the BBC. 28 Days Later takes place in 2002, to my knowledge, the year it came out, meaning that that individual, at that point, when this Jimmy was a kid, the Jimmy on TV never had his crimes exposed. I don't think it's a coincidence that Jimmy shows up for Spike as he's on the brink of his teenage years at just 12 years old. The more I think about the ending, the more uncomfortable it gets for me, and I cannot wait to see what Nia DaCosta is planning to do with this. Mortality is what makes us human. It's the one thing that unites us all, and we try to come together through love. Memento mori, memento amorim.